Alright guys, welcome to Friday Drift Tips, hosted by the Drift Podcast.
And today we're working on my R34 and talking about misfire and diagnosing the issues when you're at the track.
Yeah, how to diagnose ignition issues, or to be sure that it actually is an ignition issue. So let's talk about what is an ignition issue first. Alright, so how to tell if it's an ignition issue or something else. So with an RB, we'll take that for instance. Let's say you're going under boost and it just starts to break up and not make full boost or not make any boost at all. That's a straight sign when you're having a fault under load, whether it's NA or turbo, that it's an ignition issue, most likely. Not always, but most likely. Now, your first thing to check with an ignition issue is start at the cheapest things to replace. That's a spark plug. When you pull all of your spark plugs out, check the colors on them. If it's overly white, that means it's too lean. If it's black and wet, that means it's either oil, which you'll be able to check just by putting your finger on it, or it's going to be fuel. So if it's got heaps of fuel in there, that can be stopping the spark plug from firing, but it can also mean that that cylinder is just not firing. So you can have that issue at idle, where only a handful of cylinders are, or half your motor's basically running, and it'll be running on 3, 4 or 5 cylinders instead of 6. That can be caused by water being covered around the spark plugs if you don't run a valley cover, and like a lot of people do, and you can actually have a build-up of water around your actual spark plug if it's left out in the rain, or you've just washed it. You can blow that out with an air hose and that will fix that, and that's if you're having the ignition issue on idle. If it's under load though, be checking first and replacing your spark plugs. Then I would be checking your actual coil core pack or lead itself. I have a RB20 core pack here. They have issues around this area. Now you can cover that in electrical tape, or you can actually cover that in a heat shrink. Now the other thing to check is this spring and this contact. They should have this contact and the spring. It shouldn't just be the spring touching the top of the spark plug. You should have this contact here touching the spark plug. Making sure that is there and actually sticking out so that it actually can make contact with the spark plug. Sometimes people squash these springs or replace them with something too small, and then they sit too far down that they don't actually make contact with the top of the spark plug. These can also get dirty. I don't know if you can see, but this one's a tiny bit dirty on the top, and that can cause an issue. That's pretty much it with the core packs. You can see cracks and stuff. The other thing that can go wrong is the plug can fail, and then that will just stop making contact because the plug can slide off of this one. So you can zip tie it on or just replace the actual core pack itself. Checking ignition leads. You can check them with a multimeter. I can't recall what the exact ohmage is, but basically it's every 30 centimeters you should have a specific ohmage of resistance across your end to end of your lead. You can just check that with any multimeter. Has resistance checking, easy to check. Next is your external coils. They will have very similar issues as what your coil and plug ignition system will have, but you probably won't see cracks. You can see cracks over the end of a coil, and you can, if it's at night, you can sometimes actually see like little bits of lightning going across your positive and negative and the center terminal when it's firing. Next would be, if everything's checking out okay, is your wiring loom. Check your earth and making sure that your actual wiring loom has continuity. On a most common coils, it's three wires, so it'd be constant 12 volt, your signal wire, and then an earth wire, and then the signal and earth work together. The main constant 12 volt and the body are what makes the contact, to have four contacts basically. Making sure that they are have a proper earth bolted down onto the motor, that your motor has a correct earth between the block and the body, is another thing that people run into issues with. Then checking with a multimeter that you have constant 12 volt. Then you can also check to see if you have signal coming from the ECU by connecting an LED test light that can run from the positive terminal of the battery and putting it onto the signal position, turning over the motor and seeing if you get a flash on your test light. The common problem with an RB is the coil pack loom does fail and the plugs fail. People go ahead and change injectors and igniters and coil packs. Generally they don't fail. It's actually the wiring loom that fails, so checking the plugs, making sure the plugs are staying on there, making sure that the pins aren't loose inside the plugs. The plugs on these motors are 20 something years old. They are starting to fail. You can buy brand new replacement looms. Next, failing that, if you've checked all that and everything's okay, is your ignition timing. With your CAS, making sure that the plug is actually connected correctly onto your CAS. You then use a test light and check your timing. Now if you've done all of these checks, your next only issues could be your airflow meter, your fuel pump, your plugs on your injectors. That's pretty much about all that you'll get generally, unless you've got some very odd issue. But that is where to start. I can't stress enough not to overcomplicate things. Generally the simplest things are the things that fail. Just check the simple, easy things first, replace the cheapest things first, and work your way up to the more expensive things. But making sure that you know how to check things properly. That's the biggest issue. False diagnostics can be the biggest cause for people having downtime at the track, is not knowing what to diagnose first and not knowing how to diagnose it correctly. All of this stuff you can learn how to diagnose in your factory service manual. Surprisingly enough, Nissan and Toyota tell us how to diagnose all of these sensors correctly so that their mechanics can diagnose efficiently. So learn how to diagnose stuff. Keep the factory service manual on your phone for your sensors that you're using, and yeah, just learn how your motor works, learn how to check it correctly and properly. It will keep you running at the track, and that's our drift tip for this Friday. Thanks for watching, guys, and we will catch you next Friday.